Hello, everyone. My name is Patrice Snow, and tonight I have the distinct honor of presenting you with a special treat. Two of South Carolina's finest legal and political minds, Sarah A. Ford and Mandy Powers Norrell, have decided to join forces and start a new podcast. It's called Palmetto Primetime, and will speak about all things legal and political with a feminist twist. Now, if you don't know these ladies, let me tell you a little bit more about them. Sarah Ford has served as legal director at the South Carolina Victim Assistance Network since 2017, where she leads a team of attorneys and advocates to provide direct legal services to South Carolina crime victims. A lifelong South Carolinian, Sarah graduated from Columbia College with a BA in History and Political Science. Following graduation, Sarah taught with Teach for America in Charlotte, North Carolina, before attending Charleston School of Law. She started her legal career as an assistant public defender in the First Judicial Circuit and spent the next 8 years as a former prosecutor with a focus on crimes against women and children. Sarah also worked as an adjunct professor at Claflin University and South Carolina State University, and routinely lectures on victims' rights issues across South Carolina and beyond. Sarah is frequently featured in the media, commentating on crime and victims' rights issues, has been a regular guest on a number of programs, including Crime Stories with Nancy Grace, and is passionate about victims' rights and inspiring people in their daily lives. And Mandy Powers Norrell is a lawyer and a former South Carolina legislator who served 4 terms in the South Carolina House of Representatives and was the Democratic candidate for South Carolina Lieutenant Governor in 2018. She was born and raised in Lancaster County, South Carolina, educated in Lancaster County Public Schools, and paid for college by working at Springs Textile Mills. She graduated with honors from Furman University and USC School of Law. Mandy always knew that her calling was to represent the people of her hometown and surrounding areas, and that's exactly what she's been doing since she first finished law school in 1997. Mandy practices law with her husband, Mitch, in the areas of bankruptcy, serious injuries, and wrongful death. And she is a part-time prosecutor with the 6th Circuit Solicitor's Office prosecuting domestic violence cases. The goal of the podcast is to have a conversation on not just the facts about what's happening on the ground with something like the Murdoch murders or upcoming legislation or issues involving victims and their search for justice, but why you should be interested. How South Carolina's legal, economic, political, and media culture shapes the narrative in politics. It all ties together, and Sarah and Mandy are going to talk about it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the two ladies who really need no introduction, Sarah A. Ford and Mandy Powers Norrell.
Hey, so we're doing this.
This is real?
Awesome. So what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, if you would have told me a month ago that we would be talking and texting pretty much every day about this trial or anything, and that we were going to start a podcast to talk about trials and legislation and what's going on in the world and trying to encourage people to get involved, I would have been like, no.
I was talking to my husband today, like, if you had told me 5 years ago that Murdoch was stealing from his clients and was going to be on trial for in the biggest murder trial that our state has probably ever seen, that would have blown my mind too. And
it's been a month or a year or whatever it's been. I feel like we've been watching this particular trial, which is the topic of our first podcast, the Alec Murdaugh trial. I think that it's been a really, really long, we're in 6 weeks, right? We're going into our 6th week.
I've lost count, but something like that. It's it's brought a lot of people like all over the world together around a thing that so many of us have plunged so deeply into, that we know the minute details of this day, of the stories, of the investigation, of these people's lives. It really is amazing for so many people from so many different walks of life to coalesce around a single concept.
I've gotten messages and people from Australia, Germany, the United Kingdom, I mean, just all over. And you think, I'm watching this, I'm pretty sure I would be watching it no matter what, where I lived in the world, but just because I'm very interested in these types of cases and seeing how we go from this horrible, horrible tragedy to justice, or the pursuit of justice. But seeing how people from all across the world have really gotten involved. What do you think it is about this case, Mandy, that
I was going to ask you that too.
we're so in
What do you
sync?
think it is? I think it is the juxtaposition of the life that Alec had and the person that so many of us thought that he was. Even if you didn't know him before this, it's, now how he was perceived and the status that he carried to where he is now. And it's sort of how did that happen in his life, and what are the things within our society that allowed him to get to the point that he could do the things that he did and commit the crimes that he did,
It's like the ultimate fall from grace. I mean, you have this family dynasty being involved in politics and law enforcement and prosecution for a century. And you have Alec and his, immediate family who, he was the trial lawyers, president of the Trial Lawyers Association. He was trying these multi-million-dollar cases with multi-million-dollar verdicts. He was incredibly well known in, South Carolina legal, circles, and certainly within the South Carolina Low Country as, someone who had it all, this family ideal, or at least that's what it appeared to be, with, the power and privilege and, all of that, what comes with it, and the benefits of that. And then to see it all just completely disintegrating in front of our eyes.
And Sarah,
incredible.
there are people who have privilege and generational wealth and all this that don't have the following that he did. He was extremely generous and extremely hospitable. The first time I met him, my husband told me that he's like, I met this guy. His name is like totally not how it's spelled. And
is it Alex? Is it Alec? Ellick? I keep seeing that. I'm like,
yeah, it's Alec Murdoch. And so I was like, you're kidding, right? And he said, no, wait till you meet him. You're gonna love
it's not gonna matter. It's not gonna matter because you're just gonna be like,
and as soon as he comes up, I still remember that. I just immediately, he had an energy about him that was just, I instantly loved him. He was so nice and so friendly and just so charming. And I think, like, I, to a very small extent, am experiencing that whole questioning of my intuition that surely his family must be feeling that times 100,000. And,
right.
My heart goes out to them.
Well, I mean, you're not the only one that's thinking that. I mean, there are people all across the state, other lawyers that he's worked with nationally, family, community members, everyone who is looking at this like, what did I miss? And that's the thing about it. Like, watching him on the stand, you can see what a skilled attorney he was. If people can get past that accent, and he is incredibly skilled at what he is doing. And it makes sense to me watching him as he's been tangoing with Creighton Waters over the past couple of days. Seeing him, the way he just, I trust you, Mr. Waters. If that's what you say is on that paper, then I'm not going to disagree with you.
I've got no reason to disagree with you. And and I wanted him to take the stand because I've said that to so many people that
You've been wanting that for weeks now.
right. Yeah. And partly it's because I wanted them to understand what I was saying to them, because so many people are like, no, he's pure evil, he's a monster. And I'm like, you're not seeing the full depth of the dimensions that I'm talking about. The only way for them to see that was for him to take the stand. I was hoping he would take the stand, and he sure took the stand.
I mean, it was like, is this mic on? Is this mic, like, he was just, I was incredibly impressed with his presence. The way he was talking directly to the jury, and the way that, he was able to go from completely like shoulders over, downtrodden appearance, hunched over to, then he says, something else the next sentence, and you're like, well, dang, where did that come from? It was just, you could see how incredibly bright he is. And I think that that's something that so many people keep talking about is, we think that people who are accused of murdering their wife and son are these horrific monsters with a flashing light over their head that says, I'm a bad guy, I'm an evil person. And it's really scary when you realize,
right,
gosh, we don't, that's not the case. It's rarely the case that happens.
Right.
Certainly not with the blinking lights.
Right. Or people that are like within the home that are loved, that and so often it's people you would never ever guess. And so that's I really wanted everybody to see him and to just sort of see the, I mean, maybe I just wanted him to say, yeah, you weren't wrong to be charmed by him, because he was just, I always thought I would have trusted him completely. And so all of this has just been like such a shock. I cannot imagine what his brothers and Buster and his in-laws are going through. My heart just really, really breaks for them. And especially seeing how they are lumped in with him and villainized in a way. I just am on Twitter all the time saying, these people are victims, treat them like you would treat a victim. And then people will be like, oh, but Buster loaned his ID to Paul to buy alcohol. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with this case, number one. And number two, he doesn't deserve what he's going through.
Absolutely not. Loaning your ID, whether it was intentional or not, does not therefore lead to and buying alcohol, which then goes into a huge accident in which someone dies. Like there's no correlation between that.
And I think doesn't make you like deserving of having, your father on trial for killing your mother and brother and you losing your entire family. It's
absolutely not.
There's a specific punishment for giving an underage person your ID, and it's nothing like.
Absolutely. I think people forget, I talk about being a law nerd all the time. And I'm like, Article 1, Section 24 of the South Carolina Constitution, but those are our victims' rights laws. And understanding who victims are, where does it come from, and how does our law decide that? And it's, that immediate family or personal representative of that survivor of homicide. Obviously, it's not Alec because he's charged with the murder of his family members, but just because you may have done a bad thing in your life, and I whatever that may be, we've all done bad things in our lives. You don't deserve to be treated with derision and disrespect and say, you deserve to go to hell like so-and-so. That's really, it just crosses the line for me. I think everyone should and will be held accountable for whatever involvement they have in this, in any case. Yes. At least that's my hope. But to say that people deserve what's happening or that the family deserves that is really, it's really horrific for me to think that way, because I don't think anybody deserves this. This is not something you said, this is your punishment, deal with it.
Right. And I don't know who is anybody to say that a victim, is being punished for, something else. I mean, just, to me, it's like, treat them as victims. They are victims in this case.
Absolutely.
And, in whatever other case, then may justice prevail in whatever.
Absolutely.
But I think people really, they want to view the personalities in this, and really every saga through like a binary lens of heroes and villains. And very few people fit either of those categories very well. And victims are not going to act like you want them to.
Absolutely not. I think anytime that we put our own expectations on people, whether they're the defendant or the prosecutor or the defense attorney or the victim, and we're saying that, what we want to see them do, and then they don't, that's a no-win game for those people. And they don't even know they're playing in your own mind. They don't even know that. So I think it's really dangerous for us to have those expectations, particularly of victims, because there's so much trauma that victims go through, the direct trauma, the secondary trauma, the vicarious trauma, the trauma of your entire family. You're looking at it from Buster's perspective, your entire family being murdered. Your father is accused of that. You're talking to your dad on a recorded phone line.
Yeah.
And the ramifications that he's going to have to deal with for the rest of his life, no matter what the result of this trial is. And, I know that a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I think that that's the truth. And I think that, the pursuit of justice is not always easy. The pursuit of justice is not always clear. It's not always, check mark this, check mark that. And I think that we have to expand our consciousness of the way we look at the participants in a trial, because it's not easy.
Yes. And another thing that just sort of like gets to me is when the people who like say they don't like the defense, because I've been reading a lot, I don't like the defense.
They are so dumb.
They're dumb. They're not dumb. It would be convenient if all the people we disagree with were actually dumb. But the inconvenient truth is that very often the people who oppose us are pretty smart sometimes. And I think in this case, the defense, I mean, when Alec got done, I was just proud of Jim Griffin for not getting up and running out the back door, which is what I would have wanted to do.
Like, I need a timeout. Is it happy hour? I got to get out of here. I've got to take this time.
I need a liquor drink. I can't. Can we break for the day, please?
I'm over this. It is so difficult trying cases, and I know that I've tried cases as representing a defendant in a murder case. I've also prosecuted cases against people who are accused of murder, and murder cases they're just so tough. I mean, trials in general are just tough. But the extension of this trial, the long-term preparation, and then day after day after day, the high intensity of it, it's tremendous. Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like I'm exhausted. I think I texted you yesterday, was like, I'm exhausted. Like, what if
worn out
from watching this,
hurts from just paying attention to it. I cannot imagine what they're feeling and what they're going through, and they're not young. And so, I mean, it's just, I know they would hate to hear me say that, but they're not young.
You're not young, fellas. Sorry.
I mean,
I think at this point they'd be like, nope, we're not, we get it.
They've got to just be feeling awful physically from the toll of this.
I cannot imagine that. I really can't. It's just a tremendous marathon. Like, I remember when we first started, it was like everybody was like, when is this going to happen? It's like, we're in a marathon, we're not in a sprint. But this is like 30 marathons. It feels like that they are consistently running day in and day out, constantly tiptoeing here, arguing this, jumping to this witness, trying to balance schedules of all these people. It is
right.
I mean, I'm scratching my head.
Where they're like staying, they hardly have time to eat and prepare for the next day. And everybody expects them to be 100% the next day. I'm talking about, all the participants. It's just got to be really, really hard on them. And so I worry that, mainly thinking about the defense, them being demonized as if they are their client. I've represented a lot of people who've done bad things, and I hate to think that people think that I am them, or that I take that myself. I'm a participant in the system of justice, and just as the defense team is a participant in the system of justice here. And so just the vitriol that I sometimes see towards them, I think, is unwarranted.
That reminds me of a question I used to get when I was a public defender. You go out and everyone's like, "Oh, you graduated from law school, yay, and you're a public defender. Tell me, girl, how the heck do you defend all of those guilty people?" And I always perfected an answer that was a little bit sassy, because that's just me, but also to the point. I always thought about it as, if I'm a defense attorney and I'm representing a defendant, it doesn't matter to me in my job whether they tell me they've committed that crime, they haven't, whatever. In fact, I don't really want to know either way. I always thought that way. But what was important to me was making sure that my clients' rights were protected.
Right.
That's number one, that their rights are protected. And if law enforcement and the prosecution and everybody involved in that case did everything they were supposed to do, then I was going to lose every single time. But the point is, it's not always that simple, that people are not always going to do everything that they're supposed to do. And that's the reason why we have defense attorneys, to make sure that their clients' rights are protected and that they're not taken advantage of by those people who are in law enforcement or the prosecutor. It's a checks and balances. And so I think if we think about it that way,
that 100 guilty people go free than one innocent person pay for a crime they didn't commit. And I think that's what our system is designed to do. And I know that there are innocent people behind bars, but it's really super important that we protect our system of beyond a reasonable doubt.
Absolutely. And I think it's been something that you and I have been discussing, and I think tonight I lost my mind a little bit. I used y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here, because talking about reasonable doubt, there's a big difference between I think this and what the law says reasonable doubt is. And I think we live in an era, in a time, when what I think and what you think, a lot of people think that's it. That's everything. And it's not. It's not. It's just not. Yeah. And it's important to think about, when we are looking at a trial, we've got to adapt to what the law is. And people are like, well, the law can be wrong. Well, you're right. But that's the reason why we have appellate courts, that those decisions that are made, they're going to be checked again if he's convicted, or if anyone is convicted. There's that checks and balances thing. But we have to acclimate to the law, not the other way around. And that's the beauty of the law in my mind, is that here we have it. It's the same. And if someone is convicted, then they have the ability to file a PCR, post-conviction relief. They can file an appeal and make sure that the decisions that were made in that trial are appropriate.
Ideally.
Ideally.
Time I say this, people are very quick to point out that, that's the way it's designed, but there are people who have greater access because they have more money and status and all that. So I mean, it's the way it's designed is really good. The way that it's implemented is subject to just human fallibility and the realities of society. And so I think that's something that, people don't always, when we talk about it, I don't know that they hear that we're talking about the design of the system.
Right.
As opposed to the implementation.
Don't you know, Mandy? I get Sarah, gosh, it's like,
I know. It's not always like that. And so, and as we were talking about people affected by, and I know that like Alec's law partners are not constitutionally defined victims, but gosh, have those people been victimized by his actions? And I guess they are victims in the financial crimes, but just my heart went out to Mark Ball when he was testifying, because, his world's been turned upside down. The law firm that he established or started out in, that he's given his life and career to, and so many of the other partners have done the same, just really no longer exists because of Alec Murdoch. He was their neighbor. I mean, they all, a lot of them lived.
They were all so intertwined, work, family, friends, all of it.
They had their babies around the same time, some of them, and so their children were friends. It was such as I would see them interacting at the trial lawyers conventions, it was such a extended family, and they were always all together. And I remember I was so envious of Alec for a lot of things. Not just, his perceived wealth and status, but just what I was mostly envious of him was for the peace that he seemed to have. He was always so relaxed.
What a lesson though, right?
Oh, right. And, but that just hit me as I was visualizing him, but he just never seemed to have stress, a care in the world. He was always so chill, but his family and the families of his partners and all of them, they seemed so close and connected. And so I kind of, I hurt for them too, and how things for them have been turned upside down through no fault of their own.
And it's bizarre to me, thinking back to his testimony and his drug abuse, that he says that he, had an opioid addiction for 20 years. And I'll say, I have a hard time believing to that extent, but that's probably for another podcast with a professional doctor and, other folks.
I do believe him now. I did not believe him for a very long time.
I think that my hang up with that is just the level that he, the level to which he is saying that he used opioids, and the extent of that. I just have a lot of questions about how no one would know about that, how his body would react to that, and how he could perform at the levels he was performing as an attorney with absolutely no one having a clue. It's a little bit scary thinking about it that way.
Went to rehab. I called friends in the media and I said, he is lying. This is not true. I have known him for years. He does not have an opioid addiction. I know people with opioid addictions, and they have the droopy eyelids. They're tired all the time. They have that slurred speech. He had none of that. His testimony convinced me that maybe he did have an addiction, but
some people react differently to different medications and things. I mean, I guess if we knew we were going to go down this path, we would have had somebody join us who might not want to speak.
I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't think he took the pills he said he took.
I don't think so either. But, I think it really is, it made me think, the opioid crisis that has, just run all across America and affected people in every socioeconomic background, race, color, creed. It has affected so many people personally, whether they have been addicted to opioids or their family member or friends have. And you just see how devastating it is, and it can be whether it's true or not, whatever he's testified to, it made me think about the extensive nature of addiction. And man, it's tough. I mean, we're hitting everything in this trial. Like it's just
That's
boom,
so
boom,
true.
boom.
It's like so many issues that affect like everybody's lives. And the one that I don't think we're going to hit is like serious marital strife. And they keep like wanting to put it in there. And, you know, I'm hearing these like national media people say, oh, she consulted a divorce attorney. And I'm like, no, that turned out not to be, there's no evidence of that. Oh, she hired a forensic accountant. No, that didn't come out at trial either. There's no evidence of that. And so it's, that is like the one element that I think people want to grasp, want to pull in and say, this is something I can understand.
Right.
You know, give me the fair, show me, you know, show me infidelity so that I can understand what's going on here. And it's, you know, I mean, it might be there, but I don't think that would feel like wholesome compared to the craziness that we're
Right.
looking.
And that makes me think, you know, so often, you know, those are all theories, but they're not evidence.
Right.
You know, the evidence has to be produced. And, you know, those are theories of, you know, motive, which is not an element of the crime of murder. You don't have to prove motive. But I think it also just stems from people wanting to understand what is happening and why it's happening, and to be able to say, well, this happened because of X, or Alec did this because Y.
Something I can understand and relate to. You know, give me something I can relate to, because I can't relate to stealing $10 million. So give me something else I can relate to.
Right? It's really difficult to think about all of that and to try and rationalize it all in our heads, is where, you know, we're like the 13th juror, right? Like all of us are the 13th juror, and we're thinking, you know, what would we do or say? And you have to think that these jurors, you know, kind of jumping to that, they haven't been able to discuss this with anybody. They've been watching this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and all of these thoughts, and they're supposed to not discuss the case with anybody.
Even when they go to bed at night, climb under the covers with their spouse, they got to keep all this to themselves. If they're really doing that, and I hope that they are, they're going to need somebody to talk to when this is over, because that's just got to be like a little pressure cooker in there.
Well, you can't, you know, we talk about victims. I often think of jurors sometimes as victims, because they didn't ask for this. And, you know, the things that they've seen, the things that they have heard are just devastating.
When I had an accident case, because we do, you know, personal injuries and wrongful deaths, and we have some gruesome, you know, pictures and videos, and I will take the pictures and put them into an envelope and seal it and put a little, you know, note on it that says, you know, only open this when you're ready. Because the last thing I want to do is open a file and see something horrific, someone's body mutilated. It's just, and they're having to see this over and over and over again. I feel for them.
It's really horrible. It's, you know, it's something that, I mean, I can think back to the first time I ever saw autopsy photos, you know, as a baby attorney. And it was like, and you almost have to become desensitized to it, because you're seeing these types of things so often. But these jurors, that's not their job. You know, they are teachers and, you know, engineers or whatever their regular jobs are. And they're having to see that. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, for any of those photos to be released publicly, I am so staunchly against that, because it is, to me, it's a victim's rights issue. There's absolutely no reason. We must preserve the dignity and privacy of victims, but also thinking, why would anyone, I promise you, I've seen a lot of photos and you don't want to see it.
No, God. I mean, even the descriptions of,
Those are bad enough.
Descriptions, they were bad enough. I loved was the female medical examiner who spoke. She was
Dr. Was it Reimer?
Yes,
Yeah.
she was so wonderful because she would turn to the jury, look at them like she was concerned. She's like, I'm sorry you have to see this. This is part of what we do. I'm sorry you have to see this. And then she would speak about it in clinical terms. She wasn't like, babying them, but at the same time, she was acknowledging that, this
She was
is
respectful of, they didn't ask to be here.
very respectful. And I appreciated her so much for that.
I had someone ask me, do we offer jurors trauma-informed counseling in South Carolina? And I was like, I can barely get that for victims.
Right.
Let alone for jurors. But I think that that's a really valid question, because for some of them, for all of them, they will carry this, 6, however long we're going to be here, with them for the rest of their lives. And it's no doubt incredibly traumatic. Just the sheer issue of them being removed from their lives for so long, but just the trauma of what they're seeing and having to live with that every day.
Yeah. And like a lot of these, I assume that we've got hourly wage workers there and they're not getting paid much for jury service. So I do feel for them.
It makes me think too about, the real power players of any trial. And that's the clerk of court, the bailiffs, the people that run the courtroom. Those are the folks that really keep everything running. And they've done a really amazing job in this trial with everything from bomb threats to just the volume of people trying to get in the courthouse.
Jury. And one of my Twitter friends said today that she's like, I've just sat around all day because I didn't have Judge Newman to tell me when to get up and stretch.
Stand up and stretch.
Stand up and stretch. Bring the jury.
And it makes me that every time he does it, I'm like, it's at the right moment too. It's just like, I needed that moment. I needed that. And that the people in the courtroom needed that too.
Yes.
So, we're coming into the 6th week. I hate to speculate, but we kind of have to. It looks like the defense is wrapping up.
Midweek, you think?
Yeah. What do you think about that? Like, where do you think you're expecting things to go this week?
Well, he said he's got a couple of experts. Not sure. I mean, if I were the defense and I was like picking my ideal expert, it would be somebody to say that the times are wrong on the timeline. So and they've made a lot to do about the reception out there. I don't know if they're trying to say, so therefore it affects the times on the timeline on the phones, and
that somehow that's not reliable because of the rural area and not having, good cell phone service.
I think that would hold water because the OnStar is through a satellite, so it agrees.
It's pretty on point with everything else that the state brought up.
So I don't know, if I was the defense and could wave a wand, that's what I would want, is somebody to bust up that timeline, because otherwise I think Alex shut the door on possible alternative scenarios. So I felt so sorry for his lawyers. I'm just like, what are they going to have left?
As good of a witness as I thought he was, there were things that he was just caught in the trap of Creighton Waters, where it was just, okay, there you go, we're here.
Yeah. And
it-
Creighton didn't do what everybody thinks you should do on cross-exam, which is make the witness answer yes or no questions. Alec was never going to answer yes or no questions. And to badger him for that would just make Creighton look bad and Alec look smooth and calm by comparison. So Creighton just let him give his narratives and he would pick up whatever Alec laid down and say, okay, let's talk about that.
So let's go there.
And move him into the little trap and just let him keep talking until he got into that trap and he'd fall down. And then he'd say, okay, now what you want to talk about next? And then he'd move him into that little trap and he'd fall down.
You never stop someone who is handling the work for you. If someone's doing your job, you just let them keep doing that. And if you can adjust, you adjust. And I think that Creighton Waters did a really good job of adjusting. And I think that, he is has a lot of experience, and to tango, so to speak, with a witness like Alec Murdoch, it's a lot. And I think that he did a really good job, and he got a lot of things that we know we're going to hear about in the closing that he got Alec to say.
He took time to really understand Alec's personality and his weaknesses and his blind spots about himself. And I thought it was absolutely masterful. I was shocked when I came home and saw pundits on these like national shows saying, oh, he didn't do a good job. He really did a bad cross. And I'm thinking, he got the defendant to shut the door on possible alternative scenarios. How did he do a bad cross?
I loved it when he got Alec to say, he was asking about the dogs, and Alec said, well, there was nobody else out there for the dogs to sense. And we're like, within minutes.
Fields out there. And Creighton's like, okay.
You're right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I was like, this was great. I thought that it was really effective. I think it was non-traditional, which I love. And I think it had to be
traditional defendant
for sure. But I think watching it, I think there were a few times when I'm like, oh, you're like doing the in my office objection. But I just thought it was really masterful. I think that, overall, I mean, if any of us are getting up there to cross Alec Murdoch, everyone's going to have a million things to say. But I think overall, he really got Alec locked into things that his lawyers aren't going to be able to move him out of.
Right. I saw people on Twitter who are not lawyers, and they were saying things like, well, he should have asked him why he was so clean. Why didn't he have any blood on him?
No,
don't ask him that.
I don't want to give him a way to explain.
Right. If he's not volunteering it, you hope that you finish with him and redirect finishes with him without him ever getting a chance to say, oh, also I went and washed off after I called 911. And
I was walking around during those 17 seconds. It wasn't 17 seconds. I was like,
if you've got what you need for your closing, don't give him a chance to wiggle out. I mean, I think a lot of people thought that he just should have gotten a whole confession in that or something. Like they've been watching.
It's like, A Few Good Men. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Like that's not. It's not gonna there's no Legally Blonde moment that doesn't happen where it's like, I wanted her. No, it makes for great television, but it is highly unrealistic in the world in which we actually live.
Mm-hmm.
But I get it. I get why people want it.
Almost rage a few times. I could hear it.
Yeah.
In his voice, and it was like under the surface. And there was like one point where he just kind of bristled and got a hold of himself again. And so, I mean, Creighton scored a lot.
I thought he did too.
Overt points and covert points with that. I was amazed.
So as we're kind of wrapping up our discussion going into week 6, when do you think the defense is going to rest?
I think they rest on Wednesday. What do you think?
I think it might be sooner than that. But I think that we've also got to see what the state is going to do.
They said it would be very short. The rebuttal case would be very short. I don't think we finish by the end of the week, but early the following week.
I think it'll be, and y'all don't come for us. We're just chatting here between us girls. But I think if the defense has just a couple more witnesses and the state will have a short rebuttal case, I think it's possible that we could be into closing arguments by the end of this week. We've also got to understand that, making arguments for jury charges and things, that's going to take a little bit of time. The sheer volume of evidence that they've got to make sure is organized. I'm hoping with all the people that are involved, they're doing that and keeping that together. But sometimes it doesn't seem very organized up there. It's like, where's such and such? And it's like, oh my gosh.
When the state closed, they took time to make sure every exhibit was there and marked and ready to go. I'm trying to think what they'll bring up on rebuttal. I don't think that they will make the point that he could not have physically taken that many pills and therefore the money went somewhere else, because I think that would open up, people to think that he was trafficking in those drugs instead of taking those drugs, which involves a whole lot of really mean people who might kill your family to make a point. And I don't think the state wants to open any paths for jurors to think that. So I think you're right. I think that this does not scream drug related homicide to me at all. But I think you don't want to allow people who may not, or who likely don't have any background in what those may look like. You don't want to give them any reason to get hung up on that. But I'm going to say we'll be ready. The defense will rest. Rebuttal will be Thursday, Friday. I think we'll maybe get to closing, maybe next week. Yeah,
but nevertheless, we're on the downward slope. I think
if they're going to have to end them before the weekend. I mean, if they're going to have to carry them over beyond the next weekend. So I would see them starting on Monday. Did you see Dick offer to do a 2-hour closing to limit it to 2 hours?
Of course
because he's please stay.
You got to give him points for trying. I mean, he's really throwing it out there.
Yours to 2 hours. I'll limit mine to 2 hours.
As they say, God love him. Well, as always, I've enjoyed our conversation. Just chatting about what we're seeing and kind of taking it all in as the 13th juror here. Wow, it's been a trial. It's been
so far.
It's been a month. It's been a month. But I look forward to talking with you more about this case and other things as we start this new chatting venture, right?
I love it. I am so excited. Thank you.
Well, we hope everybody has a great afternoon or evening or whenever you're listening to this, because heck, we're so used to doing lives with everyone. You guys can listen to this at any point. But we hope that you will stay in touch with us on all social media at Palm Primetime. And of course, you can find us both on Twitter at Sarah A. Ford ESQ
and M. Powers Norrell, 2 R's, 2 L's.
Love it. All right. Thanks y'all for tuning in, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank y'all.
We look forward to producing podcasts regularly. And if you have any topic ideas, please feel free to contact us on social media. We're at Palm Primetime on Instagram and Twitter, which should be live now. And you can find Palmetto Primetime on any platform you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay connected. Thanks so much for joining Palmetto Primetime with Sarah A. Ford and Mandy Powers Norrell. Have a great day.